Welcome to chapters 57 through 61 of Turning Pro, a book club that you can find at go.fsbb.io. Now, in the last segment, we went over why your life is going to change when you go pro and how your life changes when you finally go pro. And in this final segment of book 2 of Turning Pro, which is Self-Inflicted Wounds, we're going to go over a couple of stories, Miss X and Roseanne Cash's dream, as well as talk about Stephen Pressfield's moment of turning pro and the nature of epiphanies. And I hope, frankly, that for all of you listeners out there, you've had at least a couple epiphanies so far. Let's dive in. Miss X in Bakersfield. Miss X is an attorney who lives in Los Angeles. Here's her story. I was driving home alone from San Francisco to L.A. I took Interstate 5 because it was faster than the 101, and I had a meeting I had to get to. I got into Bakersfield around 5 and pulled off to find a gas station. I woke up the next morning in a motel room, by myself, in the same clothes I'd been wearing the night before, with an empty quart of Jim Beam on the bedstand beside me. Why that time was different from any other of the hundreds of times before, I don't know. But I was staring at my reflection in the bathroom mirror. I heard my own voice say, "That's enough, darling. This shit has got to stop." Roseanne Cash's dream. The following is an excerpt of Roseanne Cash's memoir, Composed. Thanks, Rose, for sharing it. It was late in the making of Kings that I had the dream that changed my life. I had met Linda Ronstadt a few times in Los Angeles while I was recording at Lina Lane when I opened up for Bonnie Raitt at the Greek Theater, and Linda had come to see the show. And on a number of other occasions as we traveled in the same circles and worked with many of the same musicians. Her record, Heart Like a Wheel, had profoundly affected me as a young girl, and I had studied it assiduously as a great example of a feminine point of view concept record. The best one since Johnny Mitchell's Blue, I thought, and equally important in the template I was creating for what I might do in life. I especially admired her thoughtful song selection, which resulted in a very well-balanced album, and I wanted to make a record with a similarly unified concept, but as a songwriter. Just as I was beginning to record Kings, I had read an interview with her in which she said that in committing to artistic growth, you had to refine your skills to support your instincts. This made such a deep impression on me that I clipped the article to save it. A short time after that, I dreamed I was at a party, sitting on a sofa with Linda and an elderly man who was between us. His name, I somehow knew, was Art. He and Linda were talking animatedly, deeply engrossed in their conversation. I tried to enter the discussion and made a comment to the old man. He turned his head slowly from Linda to me and looked me up and down with obvious disdain and an undisguised lack of interest. "We don't respect dilettantes," he spat out and turned back to Linda. I felt utterly humiliated and woke up from this dream shaken to the core. I had been growing uneasy in my role in the Nashville community and the music business as a whole. I thought of myself primarily as a songwriter, but I had written only 3 songs on Kings. I was famous and successful, but it felt hollow, and the falsehoods were piling up. With more successes had come more pressure to be a certain way, to toe a certain line, to start a fan club, which I still refuse to do, to participate in big, splashy events, and to act as if the country music scene were a religion to which I belonged. I resisted the push to conform, to buy into certain narrow aesthetics, and to become part of an established hierarchy. I didn't want a lofty perch. I wanted to be in the trenches, where the inspiration was. The unease led me to that dream. Carl Jung said that a person might have 5 big dreams in his life. Dreams that provoke a shift in consciousness, and this was my first. From that moment, I changed the way I approached songwriting. I changed how I sang. I changed my work ethic. I changed my life. This strong desire to become a better songwriter dovetailed perfectly with my budding friendship with Jon Stewart, who had written Runaway Train for King's record shop. John encouraged me to expand the subject matter in my songs as well as my choice of language in my mind. I played new songs for him, and he thought it was too perfect, which was an anathema to him. He would say over and over, "But where's the madness, Rose?" he would say. I started looking for the madness. I sought out Marge Rivingston in New York to work on my voice and started training, as if I were a runner, in both technique and stamina. Oddly, it turned out that Marge also worked with Linda, which I didn't know when I sought her out. I started paying attention to everything, both in the studio and out. I found myself drifting off into daydreams, an old entrenched habit. I pulled myself awake back into the present moment. Instead of toying with ideas, I examined them, and I tested the authenticity of my instincts musically. I stretched my attention span consciously. I read books on writing by Natalie Goldberg and Caroline Haleburn, and begun to self-edit and refine more, and went deeper into every process involved with writing and musicianship. I realized I had earlier been working only within my known range, never pushing far outside my comfort zone to take any real risks. I started painting so I could learn about the absence of words and sound and why I needed them. I took painting lessons from Sharon Orr, who had a series of classes at a studio called Art and Soul. I remained completely humbled by the dream, and it stayed with me through every waking hour of completing King's Record Shop. I vowed the next record would reflect my new commitment. Rodney, Crowell, Roseanne's then husband, was on top of his game as a record producer, but I had come to feel curiously like a neophyte in the studio after that dream. Everything seemed new, frightening, and tremendously exciting. I had awakened from the morphine sleep of success into the life of an artist. Wow. That is a great story of transformation, of realizing that you're towing someone else's line, speaking someone else's words, and living in the shadow of someone else's life. It's time to roll your own, my friends. Let's talk about Stephen Pressfield's moment of turning pro. The following is from the chapter called Resistance and Healing in the War of Art. I washed up in New York a couple of decades ago, making $20 a night driving a cab and running away full time from doing my work. One night alone in my $110 a month sublet, I hit bottom in terms of having diverted myself into so many phony channels so many times that I couldn't rationalize it for one more evening. I dragged out my ancient Smith Corona, dreading the experience as pointless, fruitless, meaningless, not to say the most painful exercise I could think of. For 2 hours, I made myself sit there, torturing out some trash that I chucked immediately into the shit can. That was enough. I put the machine away and went back to the kitchen. In the sink sat 10 days of dishes. For some reason, I had enough excess energy that I decided to wash them. The warm water felt pretty good. The soap and the sponge were doing their thing. A pile of clean plates began rising from the drying rack. To my amazement, I realized that I was whistling. It hit me that I had turned a corner. I was okay. I would be okay from here on. Do you understand? I hadn't written anything good. It might be years before I would, if I did at all. That didn't matter. What counted was that I had, after years of running from it, actually sat down and done my work. This reminds me of the whole idea of before you want to try to save the world or do something big, why don't you go clean your room? You know? And it's those small steps, I think, that we need to take, in many cases, that help us build the momentum to keep going and to keep building. The nature of epiphanies. We usually think of breakthrough as ecstatic moments that elevate us from lower level to higher. And they do. But there's a paradox. In the moment, the epiphany feels like hell, like Roseanne Cash's dream. An epiphany trashes us. It exposes us and leaves us naked. We see ourselves plain, and it's not a pretty picture. The essence of epiphanies is the stripping away of self-delusion. We thought we were X. Now suddenly we see we're minus X. We're X divided by infinity. There is great power in this moment. We've lost something, yes, a cherished self-delusion that must be abandoned, and this hurts. But what we have gained is the truth. Our bullshit falls away. The scales drop from our eyes. In that moment, we have two options. We can reconstitute our bullshit, or we can turn pro. Final chapter of book 2 here. Shame is good. In the post-epiphanal moment, we have two things going on for us that we didn't have 90 seconds earlier. We have reality and we have humility. These are powerful allies. And we have a third force working in our favor. Shame. Why is shame good? Because shame can produce the final element we need to change our lives. Will. Epiphanies hurt. There's no glory in them. They only make good stories at AA meetings or late at night among the foot soldiers in the trenches. The soldiers know. Each of us has our own story of that ghastly, hideous, excruciating moment when it all turned around for them. I feel like this year, this moment, is the moment for you. We just went over chapters 57 through 61, the final chapters of book 2, right? Self-inflicted pain. I hope that you've had some epiphanies. Are we going to reconstitute our bullshit, or are we finally going to go pro? Have you gone through all of these 12 videos, these 12 turning pro cohort experiences, and have done nothing? And have changed nothing? So here's the questions. I got 3. Number 1, search back through the first 60 chapters or so. Did you have any epiphanies? Remind yourself. Tell us. What did you learn about yourself? What are you willing to admit? What are you finally willing to do? Let us know. Encourage us. Number 2, did you realize anything about yourself so far? Tell us. Tell us more. The more that you can tell us about how you're changing, how you're taking personal responsibility, how you're finally doing that thing, it will encourage all of us. And finally, number 3, where do you still need support or help? That's why we're here. Let us know. As a full-stack business builder community and network, we are here to help you grow. I hope you've gone through the accelerators. I hope that you've gone through all of the free training and all of the amazing content that we have here in our community. There's more, and you're going to want to finish it out with us here at go.fsbb.io. I can't wait to see what you guys are going to be writing down for this week's chapters.